Today I want to share with you my 5 biggest tips for getting a great clean tone on the Line 6 Helix. It's going to be reminiscent of the sound that you just heard. I'm not going for a very ice picky kind of bright Tosin Abasi clean tone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that's very full, has a little bit of compression with it. No overdrive though, obviously. Something that would work great in a jazz context or blues. I think it'll apply for a lot of people. But anyway, feel free to skip around at the timestamps down below. I'll have all of them marked as we go through. Now, the first thing I have to share, just because this will be a quick fix if you're having a major issue, and even on your blank presets you're getting distortion, is that you're probably distorting either the preamp or the AD converter in the Helix, in the front of the Helix. And this is if you're using active pickups or an instrument that's putting out a very hot, close to line level output. There actually is a pad you can enable in the Helix. It's in global settings, so it's not preset to preset, unfortunately. If you're having this problem with one instrument only, I would consider checking this out and seeing if that fixes it. Now please, if you didn't have the issue that I mentioned just a second ago, don't do this. This is just meant as a last-ditch attempt if nothing else is working for you. But anyway, let's move into the real tip number 1, which is actually tip number 2 now, I guess. And this will have to do with creative signal routing. I actually like to run amp simulation in parallel with the dry-through path. And I'll show you what I'm doing here. This is a preset I've had for a while. It's basically what I use to get a nice jazz tone, nice warm jazz tone. There's a little bit of compression up front. We'll talk about that in a second also. But I've got the jazz chorus model here with, I think this is the Silvertone or the twin cabinets, one of the weird twin cabinets. I'm using a 4038 ribbon mic. Anyway, there's the settings for the jazz chorus if you want to try it. And then in parallel here, I just have my direct sound going into cabinet simulation, so I still get some of that coloring, and then we blend it back. You can see the balance here. Basically even, just a little bit more of the A level. This is the tone that you heard in the beginning of the video. This is just a really easy way to get a good clean sound. It's a little bit unconventional, I know. Now keep in mind, if you're adding overdrive in front of this path, it's going to get pretty brittle. I actually do have one that I have dialed up. Talk about that in a second again. But if you turn this up and you don't have a cabinet simulation, you're going to hear a lot of that high-end fizziness. That's not what we want. So if you're using overdrive, you definitely want cabinet simulation in this next path. If you're going completely clean, and you want to add overdrive in it, I would maybe put it up here so it's only affecting the line going into the amp simulation. Something you can do is add a little bit of gain on that dry-through path just to give it a little bit more compression, some sustain. Here's clean. Here's with the Minotaur, which is a clon simulation. Yeah, you can hear the overdrive just a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be too noticeable. It's a way for you to recover some of the mids that you might have lost by going with that direct line. All right, so going on to tip number 3 now, and you'll see it here, is that maybe think about introducing just a little bit of compression right at the front of your signal path. If you think about what a nice, warm, clean tone sounds like, it's a very nice balance between the transient, the pick of the note, the attack, and the sustain. There's not too much of a gap there. So the transient is obviously going to be higher, but then the distance between the top of the transient and the actual sustain of the note is not very large, right? This is the difference between a nice warm sounding thing here and picking really hard. If I remove the compressor, you'll really notice it. Now obviously I make do with my picking here, so I pick a little bit lighter and I make up for the difference in volume here with a compressor. That can be pretty helpful. That helps us dial in a little bit more of the natural compression that we have come to expect as guitarists from a tube amp. It can be weird trying to get that feeling out of a modular, and this is just one of my techniques to do that. I normally don't like to play with the compressor always on here, but in this case it's so light that really all it does is just help get a more sustaining clean tone. It's not meant to squash your dynamics in any way. It just provides a little bit of sustain on the back end of the note, and mixing playing with the mix parameter here can be helpful as well. Now, something that I do to get a nice warm clean tone again is I'll purposely dial up a very bass heavy sound on the amp block and then make up for it so it's not overwhelming in the cabinet block. You can see a pretty aggressive low cut here at 130 Hertz. And I'm actually going to pull up a different preset here just for demonstration because it'll lead into the next point. This is one of my Magnatone emulations. And this was inspired just by actually playing a couple different examples of Magnatone amps. I had played one in Norway when I was there last year working on a ship. I didn't realize how much it cost because I wasn't familiar with the krona and what the relation was to the US dollar. Way too expensive for a reissue in my opinion. But it sounded amazing and had a 10-inch speaker that I was a huge fan of. And then more recently in June I was in a recording session and I got the chance to play a vintage Magnatone. A totally different sound, had a little bit more breakup. I just think just because it was being used for so long, it was really beat. But it had a similar kind of tone where it was just very warm and you could get a nice sustaining clean tone from it. So the point that I'm talking about here is dialing up a very bass heavy sound in the amp head and then making up for it in the cabinet with a low cut. 100 Hertz, still a little bit more aggressive than most people are used to. I think a lot of people like to sit around 80 or 90. You'll notice here I also have a dual cabinet block. We're just getting two kind of different sounds here. I'm using the 121, which is traditionally a pretty bass heavy mic. The Royer 121, I've worked with the actual copy of it a lot. The model in the Helix I feel is really well done. The low cut here, like I said, is 100 Hertz, but when you back up the distance, so I've backed it up to 3 inches, you're gonna get naturally a little bit less low end. So that's another thing that you can do to help there. 2 amps here set with different distances with the mics, different room reflections. There's just a whole lot of stuff you can do to get a great amp tone. Now going to my fifth and final tip, this has to do with the overdrive, the drive parameter in all of the amp blocks. This is where you're getting a lot of the character of the amp, and if we keep it too low, then I feel like you're actually gonna get a sound that's way too cold. It can sound lifeless. If we turn that up higher, a little bit higher than you might think is appropriate for the sound you're getting, I think it was at 4.3, and then I'll drop the channel volume so we don't have a huge boost in volume. I definitely think it's very worthwhile to play around with the drive parameter, and you want to try and find the sweet spot. So where you're not getting any actual overdrive, any audible distortion in your playing, however, you're still getting the benefits of turning up that drive parameter, the coloration of the amp that you're getting, and the sustain that comes with it. These are pretty complex chords. You're not really hearing too much overdrive. So anyway, hope this video was helpful. If you're interested in this preset bundle, my Magnatone emulation, it's got 4 presets total in it. It's built for humbucker guitars or single coils, and that's available at my shop page. The preset from before was part of my preset library, the Jazz preset, which is a collection of 50 plus presets for a low price, and you get free updates whenever I create new presets and throw them in that folder. If the video was helpful, make sure you hit the like button and the subscription. It'll make this more likely to come across someone else that it might help in the future. I'm a huge fan of the Helix. We've got a lot of Helix tutorials on this channel, free presets, walkthroughs, playing samples and stuff, and I hope that something else will be useful to you. So take care. See you in the next one.